Why did he pick that song?
You're the super.
We were told we can announce we have books and CDs. Now, you know me, that's all I care about. This piece is called The Fallout of Dreams. I came from a clean neighborhood in the city of Brooklyn. There were trees, the bridle path, a bike path, the big scary cemetery, the touch football, the dead-end streets, the sewer stickball, punch ball, stoop ball, potsy, ringalivio, and hide and seek. The movie house, the barber shop, candy store, deli, and pizza place, girls, the schoolyard, the pool hall, girls, sex, the pool hall, sex, girls, the cigarettes hidden in an old tire in the garage, and much more, much more. Almost small town America, except that Brooklyn was special, like hot dogs and the Dodgers in Ebbets Field. When the day ended, I went home, ate supper, took a bath, and watched TV. In the summer, we took a trolley to the beach. The hot eye of the sun looked down as Mom dished out the lettuce and tomato sandwiches. I'm going fast because I got a time limit. I ate quietly with the waves between my toes and sand between the bread and crackling between my teeth. So this was what a sandwich really was. There were no cherry trees in Brooklyn except the one in my backyard. I climbed it for comfort, refuge, and protection. I put my hands in my lap and swallowed the cherry pits, waiting for a tree to grow inside me. This was the age of the atom, and every atom of my fiber tried not to think of mushroom clouds. Then I'd go inside, take a bath, and watch TV. Every Thursday we had to attend auditorium in public school. Our colors were green and white. We sang the national anthem. Sometimes in our classroom, after the Pledge of Allegiance, they'd tell us to duck down in a corner or under our desks, stuff our heads into our chests, and kiss our ass goodbye. They said this would save us if the commies would ever drop the bomb. Now I know better. And that joke is still pretty funny. Afterwards, I went home, ate supper, took a bath with my toy atomic submarine, and watched TV. On weekends, I dreamt of tigers or went to horror movies with the gang. Or best of all, we'd hang out in front of the pizza place on East 13th and Avenue J, pretending to be real tough, listening to the jukebox or singing rock and roll songs on the corner. We called ourselves the J-Tones. I was the lead singer. My nickname was Little Dilly Dally. It's true, my brother was Big Dilly Dally. But my world began to cloud over, my mind got dark, my head got sidetracked, and my temperament grew darker. Panic set in. I was sedated, berated, shocked, and inundated. I'd bleed and blow my fuse. I'd go home, close the door, put my fist through the windows in my head, write a poem, pick my nose, take a shower, masturbate, watch TV, and wait. Soon came the first trips to the world of Manhattan, Radio City, crazy Times Square, 42nd Street, lights, action, lust, the growing up blues, hearing that first jazz record, zooming off to Greenwich Village and being real beat, smoking my first joint with the gorgeous bisexual black femme, and ramming into the priest with the station wagon, who blessed our stone little souls, 8 days a week blaring on the radio, and by now coming home real late at night, too late to bathe or watch TV, but never too late to dream. Then there was the big upset. The principal came over the PA one day, announced that the president had been shot, and that we could all go home. I got home, washed, ate supper, and sat in front of the TV. There was the waiting, and the waiting, and the waiting, and then the death. Suddenly weird things began to happen. The fallout from all those dreams became even more painful. My eyes started drifting. My ears heard different sounds. Different pieces of America bombarded me. Woodstock gave us life as Vietnam killed us. Negroes, buffaloes, bridges and rainbows, acid rain and strange acid worlds. Kennedy, King X. Kennedy, King X. There were insides and outsides, their side and our side, bathtubs, missiles, and TV. Well, the trolley's gone, and so's the 15-cent fare. The fallout shelters have fallen into decay, and those funny little yellow signs have rusted or been ripped away. I go to the beach whenever I can, pick my nose, masturbate, take showers, and watch TV. I still eat burgers, pizza, cornflakes, peanut butter, and cherries. I still wait for that tree to grow inside me, though now I know it never will. I think about the world a lot and pretend that I am safe as I watch the cherry blossom fall out. Sometimes I sleep, sometimes.
Never ever learned to read or write so well. You play the time just like a
Perfect. Hey, people.
Hey.
I grew up in Washington, D.C. during the 60s, so I took part in a lot of demonstrations. The 67 March on the Pentagon, in 68, Resurrection City, Poor People's Campaign, Juneteenth March, the 69 Candlelight Vigil against the war with my parents. But tonight I'm talking about the Kent State protests and Chuck Berry in May of 1970. As most of you know, 4 students were killed and others shot by the National Guard in Ohio on May 4th while protesting Nixon's invasion of Cambodia. On May 9th, protesters gathered in Washington. We already had tickets for a Bo Diddley Chuck Berry concert that night at Lisner Auditorium on the GW campus. But we went out in the streets that day with everyone else who had come to DC, in shock over Kent State and enraged over the expansion of the war into Cambodia. By this time, we knew pretty well what you needed in a protest. You armed up with a bottle of water and a bandana, kept the kerchief wet so you could cover your face when you were gassed by the police. You refilled your bottle at every chance, stuck the rag and your harmonica in your back pocket, and locked arms with your allies. Later that night, of course, we went on to the concert. A lot of people were still out in the streets as well as inside the auditorium. We wet our bandanas, refilled the bottles, and listened to Bo Diddley, who was wearing white leather trimmed with beads. By the time Chuck Berry had started the second part of the set, the place was crazy. We'd been pretty ramped up even by the time we got into the show. But when Chuck Berry started playing, we were all dancing on the seats. There was also a steady stream of demonstrators who had stayed in the streets and were now running into the auditorium to get away from the tear gas. As they slipped into the seats or the aisles next to us, we put a water-soaked bandana over their faces and kept on dancing. It was hot. We were wild. Suddenly, at 5 to midnight, the police burst into Lisner in the front of the auditorium, shouting, "We've called a midnight curfew, everybody off the streets by midnight." Who the hell could get out of the auditorium, much less off the streets, in 5 minutes? 1,500 people waiting to get trampled. Immediately, Chuck Berry stepped up to the mic and said in a really loud, calm voice, "All right, I'm going to play a bar, and I want the first row to dance on out of here. Then I'm going to play another bar, and I want the second row to dance on out of here." He struck a chord, and the first row danced on out. Then the second row, then the third, then the fourth. Chuck Berry cleared the whole 1,500-person auditorium with his guitar, and we were dancing. Dancing out into a painful barrage of pepper gas. The police were waiting for us. But we just put our arms around the people next to us, shared the bandanas, got off the streets together. Chuck Berry playing us safe on home.
Adapted from my memoir, Home Free, this is Goodbye to All That. By the late 60s, the distortions, omissions, and disinformation of the mainstream media were well documented. In response, a homegrown alternative press sprang up across the country. In San Diego, some friends and I started a radical feminist underground called Goodbye to All That. We had no set roles or jobs. Everyone pitched in to share the work. Copy meetings were long and boisterous, with lots of passionate disagreement and compromise. Early issues of Gittat included a personal account of a visit to a gynecologist and Juliet Whitman's comprehensive report on job discrimination. Everyone sold ads and persuaded head shops around town to carry the paper. We hawked it on the streets in Mission Beach and at midnight Saturdays to people waiting in line at the Unicorn for the underground movies. Gittat's cover story for issue 7 was about a local group of businessmen who'd invited 2 activists to speak to them about women's liberation. But when the women started speaking, the audience of about 100 men heckled and jeered them. Then someone fired a shot, 2 shots, blanks from a real gun. The frightened women were escorted out of the hall with catcalls of "Bring out the rape squad." Our story in Gittat was collectively written by some of our staff and included the complete membership roster of the club, which I thought was great. But I was troubled by the drawing proposed to accompany the article, a picture of a placard that said, "Today's chauvinist pig is tomorrow's bacon." I had never been comfortable calling men pigs. But my sisters were adamant about the graphic, and I was voted down. For the next issue, I wrote an article titled, "When is a Man a Pig? The Paradox of a Humanist Revolution," arguing that while some men acted like animals, it dehumanized us to call them pigs. Virtually everyone at the copy meeting opposed my position. They insisted that I sign the piece, a practice we usually eschewed, to make it clear that it was just one person's opinion. Some of the other women wrote a response set on the same page. It was called "Yes, But." And it detailed recent police brutality at a rally up in LA. Some of us, they wrote, feel that pig is the only name for these brutal men. I was deeply disturbed by this episode. It revealed a rift between me and my fellow radicals. Juliet had the last word in a letter to the editor signed Sally Sow, stating, "Your last issue demonstrates your careless and arrogant de-animalization of pigs. Pigs do not carry weapons. We don't invade other animals' territory to exploit, bomb, or defoliate it." Juliet disagreed with me too, but her humor took the edge off the conflict and made me feel a little less isolated. So today, as we unite again to resist the reactionary forces that threaten so many of the gains we made, I hope that the movement will embody the humane values that we aspire to realize for the whole society. Thank you.
Between sundown's finish and midnight's broken toe, we ducked inside the doorway as thunder went crashing, as majestic bells of boats struck shadows in a sound seeming to be the chimes of freedom flashing. Strength is not to fight, flashing for the refugees on their unarmed road of flight, and for each and every underdog soldier in the night, faces hidden as the walls were tightened. As the echo of the wedding bells before the blowing rain dissolved into the bells of the lightning, tolling for the rebel, tolling for the rain, tolling for the luckless they abandoned and forsake, tolling for the outcast burning constantly at stake. We gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing through the mad mist cameron, wild ripping hail. The sky cracked its poems in naked wonder, tolling for the tongues with no place to bring their voice, all down and taken for granted situations, striking for the gentle, striking for the kind, striking for the guardians and protectors of the mind, and the poet and the painter, far beyond their rightful time. We gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing. What's that I hear now ringing in my ears? I hear that sound before. What's that I hear now ringing in my ears? I hear it more and more. It's the sound of freedom calling, rising up to the skies. It's the sound of old ways of falling. You can hear it if you try. You can hear it if you try. If you try.
Hola, I'm Mireya. Yeah, this is a little higher. Gracias, thank you. That was La Vie en Rose. First trip to Paris. June '66. Europe on $5 a day. Charter flights to Europe. Paris no longer a dream. Reina landed in her beloved Paris. Walking down the Boule Miche in her pretty sundress, Reina was beginning to feel she was a Parisienne, believing herself a sophisticated and more confident in her French now. It wasn't hard to fall into easy conversation with that attractive, dark-haired young man who spoke to her as she stopped to look at shop windows. In a strong accent, Reina suspected was from the South. He said his name was Alan and was a student. After the talk about books and philosophy, he invited her to stop in for a coffee right next door where his friend lived on the second floor. Reina, enchanted, accepted. They climbed the 2 flights in the dark, dank building and entered a living room with facing couches and a big window to the street at the end. Reina took a seat near the window and smiled as her friend disappeared to get the coffee, while the room slowly filled with other men, all of them speaking the same accented French and another language, sounding like Arabic to her. Slowly, Reina realized she was the sole woman in a room full of Algerians, considered the lowest of the low by the French. And suddenly, fear started to fill her. With each new man entering the room, the door seemed further and further away. All of her gut said, "Get out of here!" But how could she just leave and not be detained by the 10 or more men there? How could she get out? Thinking this, Reina looked out the window and in a burst heard herself call out, "Jean, Jean!" And she was waving and tapping on the window to her friend Jean, who was passing by. At the same time, she stood up and in impeccably polite French called out to Alain and the other, "Je suis désolée, mon ami Jean m'attend, je dois partir, merci." And she quickly opened the door, leaped down the stairs, and ran around the block. Of course, there was no Jean waiting for her. From then on, she, like a true Parisian, avoided the Algerians.
Good evening. I was a teenager in the 1960s, growing up in Louisiana, the Deep South. My mother and father thought it very important for me to have role models to emulate. My mother wanted me to be exactly like the Methodist minister at our church. My father wanted me to be a great baseball player like Mickey Mantle or Roger Maris. To tell the truth, I wanted to be Kitty Carlisle. In memory of Kitty Carlisle Hart. My name is Davidson Garrett. My name is Davidson Garrett. My name is Davidson Garrett. And now, panel, we'll begin our questioning to find out who is the real Davidson Garrett. Let us begin our questioning with Miss Kitty Carlisle. Number one, what does pianissimo mean? Number two, Who was Franz Lehar? Number 3, who starred in A Night at the Opera with Groucho Marx? That 60s game show, to tell the truth, introduced America to Orson Bean, Peggy Cass, Bud Collyer, and Kitty Carlisle. Urbane, cosmopolitan types, burning black and white televisions with sunny personalities. But it was Miss Carlisle who furnished the class. Seated behind the panelist desk, glowing with a lacquered bouffant and smart Chanel dress, she flashed champagne smiles at slick imposters stumping with false identities, prompting her to bestow on these tricksters a slow laugh like a grand doyen amused at a ritzy Park Avenue party. Such radiant sophistication earned envious affection from me, a hick in the hinterland, who for a few minutes each week was vicariously transported by Kitty to glittery Broadway or New York society, as I sat transfixed on a designer couch from the chic catalog of Montgomery Ward. And now, will the real Davidson Garrett please stand up? Thank you. Thank you.